أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد
Peace be with you and welcome back. I'm glad you decided to come back. Can't be very easy. In a very short space of time, you've been knocked off your perch, no longer a free person. You've established that you're indebted to the bank and that probably your descendants for generations to come have already been bonded with the government using your descendants as security for the loans that it has taken and for which interest continues to be paid. In South Africa, in excess of 50 billion each year. We learned that the law, which was supposed to protect us and which was meant to enforce our rights, has become the tool of our imprisonment and enslavement. We learned that our religious institutions have become infiltrated by agents of Satan to such an extent that the activities of Satanism are now being practiced in the name of the practice of the worship of God. And one wonders, how much worse can this all get? In this segment, we're going to be looking at a very important aspect, monotheism, and what it means. Because there is only one God. God alone is worthy of being worshipped. No one and no thing else. And for us to understand this worship of God, we need to understand what it means to worship. And we have to ask ourselves, with God in His infinite mercy having assisted mankind throughout the ages, has He given us any advice as to how to tackle the question of worship? Because we've got to remember, just like with slavery, because we did not know what the essence of slavery was, Satan was able to enslave all of us while we were totally ignorant of it happening. Is it possible that this can happen with the worship of God? That if we do not understand what it means to worship God, that we could end up becoming a worshipper of Satan and not even being aware of it. When we look at man, you, I, anybody else, what we've got to realize is that man cannot act with passion and determination in the absence of conviction in the truth of his cause and in the absence of voluntary participation. Unless these two qualities apply, man cannot act with passion and determination. That is why, when Satan made us his slaves, he did this by deception, so we will think that we are free, so that we will act with passion and determination in his service without being aware of it. One of our biggest problems is that over the years, our systems have become infiltrated by the agents of Satan, so that the ideas and the thoughts that have been fed to us and which have become part of us are thoughts and ideas which actually perpetuate our own slavery. We have become colonized in our minds. We are mental slaves. We have become conditioned to think with the mind of the oppressor, thinking that things which are in fact to the benefit of the oppressor are in fact good for us, when in fact the opposite is actually the reality. So the first step in our liberation is actually to liberate our mind and to liberate the way in which we think. In order to understand the question of worship, we have to go back and look at a little bit of background information. What is the challenge of Satan? God teaches us in the Last Testament, and perhaps I should take the opportunity of spending a few minutes on why the Quran is called the Last Testament. It's also called the Criterion. Let us, for example, imagine a world in which man never died, and that every man that was born and every woman that was born was still alive today. We will then have amongst us Prophet Muhammad and all his companions. We would have Jesus and his disciples. We would have Moses and his brother Aaron. We would have all the other prophets, including Abraham and Job and Noah and Joseph, all the way back to Adam and Eve. May God's blessing and peace be upon them all. And let us say that in this world that we are imagining, that God sent letters, mail service to mankind via an angel, and that at specific times this angel would come, let us say at Mount Sinai, and deliver this letter from God to mankind. What would be the situation? I would imagine that we would have a constant vigil at the mountain, waiting for when the next letter would come from God. As soon as that message comes, people will eagerly take the message and spread it wide and far, because everybody would want to get immediate access to this new teaching from God. And we can imagine that as time progressed, God would give man knowledge that was appropriate to his time. So when we have man as a nomad who was a very, as far as technology was concerned, very primitive, he would give man advice appropriate to that time. For example, not to harm the animals, be kind to them, etc. When we come to a later stage and God gives us new information by a new letter, everybody would accept the teachings or the knowledge in that new letter, as well as accepting what God had given in the past. And if God gives us information that now abrogates or it neutralizes what he had given in the past, we will accept it, because we know that what was appropriate for the past may not be relevant now. It may have been appropriate in the past, but of no relevance now. So the information and knowledge may change. And in this way, for example, God may introduce the teaching in a former letter. God may inform us that the consumption of wine was quite acceptable, because our technology was very primitive, and the wine that we were drinking, the alcohol content was negligible. We were essentially drinking fruit juice, grape juice. And in a later letter, when God advises us, because in our environment and our new technology that we are able to distill liquids to such a high alcohol content, God now advises us that the consumption of alcohol-containing products is forbidden. We would all accept God's teaching. We will not hold on to the old one and neglect the new one, because we know it came from God. Also, for example, we may have advice with regards our commerce. In the past, everybody was essentially self-sufficient. Trade and commerce was almost non-existent. The idea of interest never arose. So God would not advise us about interest, because we would not know what God was talking about. But in a later letter, if God advised us that participating in any activity that involved interest was unacceptable, we would accept God's teaching, because now we were practicing interest. We